So we're doing data visualization using D3.js. So let's get started. So what is D3? It's a JavaScript library that consists of thousands of lines of pre-written code that we can use to make our lives easier. Basically, you can use functions that are like hundreds of lines and 2 lines. So it stands for data-driven documents because it solves the goal of manipulating data-based documents in an efficient manner using web standards such as HTML, CSS, and SVGs. So basically, with normal HTML and CSS, that's pretty hard to do, but this makes it easier. But why would you want to use this? So you can use it for making data appear on the screen, which is the most common use case. You can make graphs, maps, diagrams, pretty much anything. And I have a few examples later in the presentation. But another part of the library that isn't as flashy is the tools for data manipulation. So the type maps or dictionaries aren't native in JavaScript, so they add that in. Actually, you can make it by pushing an object into an array, but that's weird, and you can have multiple stuff on the object, but D3 has it for you. So you can not only just have that data type, the map, there's also functions associated with it, like has and get. So you can use has to figure out if the map has that key, or you can use get and it'll return the actual value of the key. So it's pretty useful for data stuff like that. And there's also a few other types like sets and things. So the last thing it can be used for has overlap with jQuery and other DOM-related manipulation tools. So basically, you can grab something in the DOM, which is the document object model, which I have a quote from Mozilla developers. It's a programming interface for HTML, XML, and SVG documents, and it provides a structured representation of the document or a tree, and it defines a way that the structure can be accessed from programs so that they can change the document structure, style, and content. Basically, you can go and grab a specific ID or all of one class or something and make changes to it, have it so that when you click on that element, you can have something else happen. A lot of cool stuff. So you can do that with jQuery, and you can also do that with D3. So to give a couple examples, oh man, this doesn't work as well because of the screen resolution.
Can you slow that down?
I can. Thank you. So this is a radial layout tree map. So I've personally seen one of these there's an app called, Daisy Disk, which basically takes your hard drive and represents it like this. And so what you can do is you can click on any of these, and these are all files. So you can click on it, and it'll expand it into like a bigger file. And you can click on this to go back. So say this is like your applications folder, and you can see like which applications are holding the most amount of disk space. Or really, you can do it with anything that's file-based, like a tree, or anything that's tree-based, like a file system. So yeah, you can also do this with D3. by creating the SVGs, making the donut kind of shape, which we're actually going to make a donut. And yeah, so you can make all the SVGs with D3. You can select things so that when you click on it, it'll change. All kinds of cool stuff. And then this one is also kind of similar to what we're doing, which is a map. And all of these are available on the D3 website, which I've put in the presentation, which will be posted later. Or you can go to D3 examples, just Google it. So this is, I think it's just made up data for this, but you can hover over states and it'll show you data in the tooltip. It's pretty cool. And it'll color states based on the data that you have. A good use for something like this is like seeing trends across the states. I can show you the example that we are going to make, actually. And let's see how well this works. So this is what we're going to be making. It's the election data from the 2012 presidential election. And the red states are obviously the ones that the Republicans won in, and the blue states are the ones that the Democratic candidate won in. And the darker color states, I don't know if all of you can see that, but the darker color states are the ones that had over 60% vote that way. So either 60% or above Republican or Democrat. And you can see like how the majority of like the heavily Republican states are like across the whole like Midwest to Eastern, South. And then like for the Democrats, it was mostly pretty close because there's only a few that are strong Democrats. And then we are also going to be making this, which does not resize as well. There we go. So this is a donut chart. It's exactly the same as a pie chart, except with a hole in the middle. And what we're going to be doing is making it display data like this and also be accustomed to our data. So the data we have is the electoral votes, which state it is, and what percent voted either Republican or Democrat. So what I did here was I made it so that the size that it takes up in the chart is relative to the number of electoral votes that it has. So you can see that like the bigger the state is, the more impact it had in the election results. And then when you hover over it, you can see which state exactly it was, and then it'll show how many electoral votes it had and the percent that voted the winning way in that state. And I didn't account for the states that have split electoral college votes because that's not in the data. So yeah, you can find the rest there. There's lots of examples. Yeah, lots and lots and lots of examples. So I just explained what we're doing. And you can find it at that URL if you want to play around with it. So yeah, let's get started. So does everybody have a preferred text editor that they can use. Yep.
Did you share the slideshow anywhere?
I will after.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, the CSV is sourced off of my GitHub because browser permissions won't allow us to grab it off of local storage. So that's something weird with D3 CSV parse, where it won't, for some reason, let you grab files off of your own storage, so it's hosted here. Yeah. Okay. So. If you want to open up a text editor, we are going to be making an HTML file that you can just call. I'm going to create a new folder. Two underscores this time. So you can make a index HTML file. And is everybody familiar with HTML and CSS enough? Okay. So I've made a paste bin if everybody wants to go to that URL, you can find the HTML and copy it in. So for this, the HTML isn't that important. It's really just a skeleton. Oh, shoot. You can go to that URL, sorry. It's really just a skeleton that holds containers for us to put our own SVG elements in using D3. And so once you've downloaded that, copied and pasted it into your, is that working for everyone? Yeah. So once you've done that, you can change the author. Let's see what it looks like. Did everybody get it? Okay. So it looks very exciting. Now we're going to do the same thing with CSS, which is at this URL. And I'll do that on my own computer. And in the HTML, if you notice, there's the CDNs for D3 and for another library that we're going to be using called data maps and topo.json. And those two are for displaying the maps, the map. So right didn't make my links relative to that. Okay. So if everyone's got those two, then we can start on the JavaScript file.
Has everyone gotten the CSS and HTML that you posted?
So, everybody make a JavaScript file now. You can call it whatever you want. I put mine as index.js and linked it down there. So yeah. So first, we are going to parse through our data. So we're gonna do in D3 the CSV. I'm gonna copy and paste this in because it's gonna be a lot faster. And then you can all copy. That. So this is putting in our CSV, which is linked to my GitHub. So this part is to rename the elements of the CSV. So we're going to be taking in our, here, I can actually show it to you. So this is the CSV, and it's got, it's got all of these categories. So at the top, it has to have state, electoral votes, Democratic, Republican. It can really have anything as long as they're categories. At the top, first row, and then everyone after that corresponds with it. So what we're doing when we're copying this is renaming state with a capital S to lowercase, electoral votes to EV, capital D to lowercase. And the more important part of this is the plus signs, which are turning those strings, because they'd normally be parsed and put into strings. Yeah?
Where did you copy that from? Especially the first one?
This one?
Yeah, in index.js. Yeah.
This is on my computer.
Oh, so do we...
You can type that, or I can copy and paste. Do you want this part, or like the whole thing?
Can you make that a bitly so that everyone has access to it?
To that?
Yeah.
We should.
Yeah, just open the bit.ly.
Okay.
And you just throw it in there.
Yeah, you can even post it to the event page, too, if that's...
The JavaScript or the
No, the-
CSV? Okay, yeah. That should be more manageable. So, the plus signs make the variables integers instead of strings, like they would normally be after being parsed. So I'll just wait until everybody has that in. And so if some of you are ahead, what you can do to test this is make a function after that with the variable d. And you can do a console log of d. Yeah, console log d of 0. And that should return the first data point. In the console. It won't print it on the HTML, sorry. Is anyone having problems with that? Yep.
I'm getting a access control allowed origin headers thing.
Yeah, Sam. Ooh, that might be because.
I think that's because of the bit.ly.
Yeah. That's fine.
Well, they could just paste that link into the browser and then copy the link that
No,
it redirects it to, right?
When you put it in the browser, it just downloads the file.
Yeah,
Oh,
because it's a link to the file.
Yeah.
Because it's
Okay.
They could GitHub just, oh, well, and then post a link in the Facebook event.
yeah, I'll just do that.
Do any of you not have, like, access to the Facebook event?
Cool.
No,
Because that could do the thing.
That'll do it then. Where is the... All right. So yeah, that's posted in the event page, on the event page. So if you go to that, it's down there. What's up? No. Why was that so low?
So did everybody find the link okay?
What? There we go. Yeah, that'll work. I was getting the same error. For some reason, mine is not violent. So is everybody done with that? All right. So,
You guys can raise your hand if you need help, and one of us will come and help you.
I always need your help, August.
oh, that's what it is. There we go. So that's what it should look like. All right. So we're gonna move on. If I didn't say it before, we're gonna start with the map. So first, we're going to make the map by doing this using the data map library. So this should just make a simple map on our page. Yeah, that'll work. And I removed the highlight on hover here. Okay, so what this is doing is we're creating a map variable using the data map module, and we're setting the scope as USA because we want a US map. We're selecting our element using normal, good old get element by ID. We're telling it to be responsive so that it will resize with the web page. And there's a part of the module that's geography config when you're creating a map, which you can do a bunch of things with, like edit the tooltip, change the highlight on hover, change a bunch of things.
Could you demonstrate the highlight on hover?
Sure. So here it is with it off. And then the default is true, so you can delete it, but I'm just going to put true. And here it is with it on. Fancy stuff.
So D3 has maps built in. I didn't know that.
This isn't actually D3.
Oh.
This is something that somebody used D3 and Topo.json to make creating a map very easy. So does everybody got that? You got a question?
So, wait, do we need to install a library to get the map, or?
No, it should work. All of the CDNs are linked in the HTML file that everybody copied.
So that's like a place where like the library's hosted online.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's like that's where your source of info.
Yeah, so as Stephen was saying, if you don't know, a CDN is where a file is hosted online, like this, the CSV file that we pulled earlier. The one for data maps is here in the HTML file that we copied. This is the one for Topo.json, which adds the topography. So you would really only need that to create a map, but the data maps library makes it a lot easier to just make something appear on the screen. And then this is our D3 one. So there's that again. So is that working for everybody? All right. So what we're going to do next is do a loop through our data set. So I'm actually going to rename this to data because that's what I had in the nope. That's what I had in mind when I made it. So we're going to do a for loop and loop through every element in our data. So we access the first element in our data by doing 0 up here. And then we just have to do that for every single one. Because we're going to add the different color fills to it. So that should not take too long to copy. You can also loop through it however you want, ascending or descending. I just did descending. So next up is to make our colors list, which actually I ended up using less of these. Than I originally intended, so. Live coding, yeah. So the colors list is what we're going to pull from. It's not even a list. It's just a series of variables that we're going to pull from for our fill colors so that we don't have to do them later. And actually, if that is too much, and you can obviously replace these with any hex colors that you want, or RGBA, or anything. I just picked what I thought were some nice red and blues. So does anybody have any problems? Okay. So now we're going to select our state variable inside of our for loop. So we're going to go ahead and D3 select, add a dot because it is a class when data maps makes every state. So it's a class, so we need to add the dot in front of it, and then do data of I, which is up here, our variable, our iterable. And then select the state element that we declared up here. And then comes some if-else statements in order to, sorry. Those comments don't make sense anymore because I deleted a line. So in these if-else statements, we're taking, in the first one, we're taking our data of I, so the same thing we accessed here, and we're doing the Democrats. So if it's a Democrat, or we're taking the data percentage for the Democrats and comparing it to the Republican percent. And we converted them into numbers up there. So if the Democrat percentage was higher, we're going to compare it to 60. You can obviously change this if you want to view other trends. If you wanted to put in a slider using jQuery UI, you could, and then just have it change that variable as you went up and down on the slider. So we're comparing it to 60%. Go ahead, change it. Don't change it. And then we're changing the fill on our state selector, or on our state variable that we selected up here. And we're changing it to heavy and light Democrat and Republican. And we're doing the same thing down here in our else statement with the Republicans. Some pretty easy stuff. So, if you go back, shoot. Yeah. If you go back to the your web browser, you can see that it's, I'll only keep this up for a second. It's made this, which is what I showed earlier. And so the only problem is it's responsive if you refresh it. If you resize the browser and refresh the page, it'll respond, but it won't redraw it. And that's because we need to select the window and then do a really simple on function. which we'll call our, and this is outside of our for loop. That's the end of the for loop. So we need to do a really simple on function that selects the window in D3. And call a map resize. Which is a built-in function in the data maps library. And it'll allow it to resize when you adjust the window without refreshing the browser, which is pretty cool. And it's also something you want to think about more as phones are being used and weird display sizes. So does everybody have that? Oh, question?
Okay. Where are we getting data from then?
The data is coming from this CSV,
Okay.
which is this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that must have been out of the room when we changed that. Okay. Thank you.
Oh yeah, sorry, I changed that from D to data. I can move back to the bottom. So yeah, that's the map. Is everybody seeing it? Any questions? All right. Very cool. So yeah, it's super easy to make a map with data maps and D3, but what can we do with just D3? Well, I already showed you, and it's on my site. So what we're going to be doing is making this now. So yeah, we're not going to do a whole new page. We're just going to keep it on the same one. So in order to do this, we need to add a little bit to before we parse the data. Just add some variables and some functions to create the SVGs that we will be using. So first off, we're going to set up the width and height. So I picked those, oh, and the radius. I picked those. You can pick anything you want. This one does not resize because D3 does not have that. It might have that built in. But it's usually not covered. I think if you make the SVG yourself and then assign classes to it, then you can make it resizable and responsive. But since we're creating it with D3, these are just set at pixels, like you don't specify what kind of units they are. So they're pixels, and therefore non-resizable. All right, so once you set your width and height and radius to be that, we're going to create our arcs. So it's labeled arcs, but we're using it to create a circle. And it'll create the path elements for us using arc data, which is all built into D3. All right. So after that, we have this data, but there's no data for how far these parts of the circles should go. So there's no indication of how far they should go. To add that to our data set, we're going to pi our data. So we're going to add a variable pi, which is going to use D3's layout pi to create the specific points where each element should stop. And we're going to base that off of our we're going to create a function d, which is just a generic function, which will call the relevant data when this is called later. And then we're going to return the data.electoral votes so that it's based on electoral college votes. And you can change that to be whichever variable you want, but that's the only one that made sense for this data set. So is everyone good on that? All right. So now we're actually going to append the SVG to our Pi container, which we made earlier in the HTML file. So to do that, we're going to select the Pi container div, and then we're going to append an SVG with attributes width and height, what we said earlier as our width and height variables. And then we're going to append a group in order to hold the pie chart inside of it. And then we're going to move it so that it is out of the top left corner, which is where it places it by default, using a transform. So is everybody getting it? Nothing should be actually showing up on the screen if you refresh the page. But if you inspect it, there should be an SVG now. Here, I can show that. So if you inspect the page, it's not going to show anything because there's nothing in our SVG, but we have made it, and it is right there. So you should be seeing that if you go into the dev tools for your preferred browser. So has everybody got that? So now we're moving back into this function. And we are going to create another variable called G. And we're going to select all arcs. And now these arcs don't exist yet, but we're going to make them later. And we're going to make sure that the data is on those. So we're going to insert the data as our pi of data. And pi is that function that we made up here. And then we're going to do enter, which I seem to have deleted the comment on. I believe enter actually enters the data. And then we're going to append our G with class arc. So after that, we are going to append our path. In which we are assigning our attribute D arc, and we're saying to fill it, and we're making a function where the data, so, okay, this is our pi data that we created, and our pi data is an object where it has where it should draw the circles, like what angles, I believe, it should draw the circles at, or the lines at. And it also has our original data as an object within that first object. And so we're accessing our data within the pi data. And then inside that, we're accessing the Democrat data. So the percent that the Democratic candidate won. And then if it's greater than or equal to the data for the Republican candidate, we're going to return Democrat blues of data as at state. Okay, I skipped this part. Oops. So what this is doing is it's calling this function Democrat blues and Republican reds. So those are these things called ordinals. And in D3, they are basically color sets that you can make yourself. And you can put whatever colors you want in there. And I chose some blues to be assigned to the Democratic candidate and some reds to be assigned to the Republican one, which are, I'm going to put them right there. So those can go first in your file. And so we're going to be creating the global variable Republican reds, which is a D3 scale ordinal. And then we're going to set the range to this set of colors for each one. And so those, you can change the colors, of course. And what D3 does is it actually goes in and grabs a random color to fill each element with. And so it's really just for aesthetics, if you do it this way. If you wanted to, you could go in and make a whole bunch of if-else statements down there, and you could make every single color be assigned to a certain percent, say. So like a percent range. So like 80 to 100 would be like the darkest, and then go lighter from there. But D3 will choose some random ones for you, just so it breaks up the colors, because if you had all of them as this exact same red or blue, it'd be hard to tell where one began and one ended. If you had a whole bunch of reds or blues next to each other. So, once you've done that, if everything goes well, and you've copied it all correctly, you should end up with that. And it doesn't hover or anything, but it should have filled in the data correctly. Yeah, should have just filled in the data correctly, filled in the colors, and we will take care of hover in a second. So does everybody have that? So does everybody have this? All right. Cool. So, inside our function, we are going to do some select ons. So, I'm just going to copy this whole thing, and I can talk through it. So, basically, This selects the G element that we've been referencing to, which is each individual slice of the diagram. So it says G on mouse over, so when you mouse over it, it'll do this function. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this, which is the element in question. And we're going to add opacity 0.8. So we're going to make it a little more opaque when we hover over it, when we mouse over. And then we're going to select the PyInfo section in the HTML file. We're going to select the PyInfo div. And we're going to append a div, which will put one nested div. And we're going to do a classed function, which will add the class stateInfo to it. So stateInfo true. Add to the class that we just made, or add to the div that we just made. And then we're going to put some HTML in it. And yes, we could have made the divs inside of just the HTML, but where's the fun in that? You get to see more functions this way. In case there's that special use case where you need to append something and you can't just hit HTML. So inside that HTML, we have h1 class, state name, data state. Again, it's the same arc data, the original data, then the state. So this time we're getting the state abbreviation. And we're putting it in an h1 tag, which has been styled in the style sheet that you copied over. And then we're putting a span next to it, or below it because of the styles. And it's going to be the electoral votes. So we're putting electoral votes in quotes, and then accessing the data, ending the tag. And then underneath that, we're going to add our percentages. So if the Democratic candidate won for that data point, we're going to select stateInfo, which is the div that we made above, and we're going to append an h2 element inside of that div, and then we're going to put some text in it, which will just place text, which will be our data for that state, for the Democratic candidate. And then %Democrat so we can tell who won if you can't see that it was blue. And we're going to do the same thing with the Republican candidate. So does everybody have that? Any problems? All right. So, save it. And then refresh. And then we can hover over it. Except it doesn't go away when we go off of it, or when we select other ones. So we'll end up with this giant blob. So what we have to do then, so just like we put our mouse over, we have to do a mouse out. And this part is really, really simple, because literally all we're doing is deleting what we just made. And we can just choose the parent element of the one that we made, and it'll delete everything inside of it as well. And we also should probably change the opacity back to full when we hover off. So, is anybody having any problems? All right. Well, if you're done with that, that is actually last element. So, if you're done with that, it should look like this. And it should do that. So yeah. Made two graphical representations of the same data using D3 and a little bit of data maps. Both of these are huge libraries that do a lot more than this, obviously. And yeah, I hope that you guys have learned from this. And yep,
You just mind leaving the JS file up there?
yeah, sure.